Welcome into Cougar Tracks here on the KSL Sports YouTube and KSL NewsRadio, your legacy home of the Cougars. I am your BYU insider, Mitch Harper. It's Wednesday, December 17th on the program, 10 days away until BYU football takes on the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets in the Pop-Tarts Bowl. It's been fun to see the Media Day content from Kalani Sitake and Brent Key this week, but we got to start things off with BYU's opponents in 2026. And that's our top story of the day.
The top story of the day. The biggest story in the world of BYU sports right here on Cougar Tracks.
BYU football needs a game in 2026. The Cougars' non-conference schedule has experienced a change. The California Golden Bears, who were scheduled to play in Provo September 12th, 2026, to give BYU the required Power 4 out-of-conference game and give BYU a 7th home game, that game is no longer on the books. It was officially canceled by Cal Berkeley to BYU. We reported that on KSLSports.com. We got the correspondence between Cal and BYU on the cancellation. Here was the official documentation from Cal notifying BYU of the cancellation. The cancellation occurred October 13th, and they notified BYU. As you are aware, the ACC recently determined that its member institution football programs would be required to play 9 conference games starting with the 2026-27 academic year. Due to this change in the number of non-conference games allowed, we are canceling our games with BYU, originally scheduled for September 12th, 2026 in Provo, and September 11th, 27 in Berkeley, California. And then they go on to say that there will be no liquidated damages required, no payout, because it was a change created by the ACC that led to this change. Cal has 3 non-conference games already with this change. They've got UCLA, which is a former Pac-12 rival, and in the UC system, education system, at UNLV, and then Wagner in the FCS ranks. BYU has 6 home games, so that's okay. They've just got 2 non-conference games, and when you look around the schedules for 2026, there are not many openings unless you get some multi-game changes to get a Power 4 team to Provo. It's just tricky because it's hard enough to get Power 4 opponents to Provo already, and to do it on what would be considered short notice, it's very challenging. But this will be very interesting to see what BYU AD Brian Santiago and BYU can put together for this schedule. This is one of those moments where BYU needs to hit up Dave Brown, old gridiron scheduling executive. Hey, Dave, help us out with some scheduling here because BYU is in a little bit of a pinch. Honestly, to me, I would look at this situation and maybe take a chance, potentially, on some one game on the road against a big dog. And I don't know how you get it done because, again, most of these schedules are pretty much locked up. Now, you look at the group of 6, and there's a lot of openings, particularly in the Pac-12. Also, the American, they have some openings as well. Maybe the Big 12 can give an exception to BYU and say, hey, you got put on, short notice. This is what's got to be the case. Baylor also had its game against an ACC team postponed with SMU, but Baylor already has 3 non-conference games scheduled, one of which includes a game against Auburn scheduled for Atlanta at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. Because I thought maybe there could be a situation where you play a non-conference conference game, BYU and Baylor, play it in Provo, and away you go. But Baylor has no need for that with the change with SMU postponing its game due to the ACC 9-game schedule. And all of this is happening because the ACC is moving from 8 games to 9 games. And what's interesting, too, in 2026, the ACC will have 12 of its 17 members playing 9 conference games. The other 5 will play 8 conference games with 2 games against power conference opponents. Help it make sense. I don't understand that at all. And it's unfortunate that Cal couldn't fall under the umbrella of the 8 conference games with 2 non-conference power opponents. Most of these leagues now are requiring 10 power conference games. The only league that hasn't come out and publicly said they're requiring their teams to play 10 power conference opponents in a season is the Big Ten. The SEC, the ACC, the Big 12. Really, the Big 12's been doing this forever. The Big 12's had 9 conference games since 2011. So everyone's kind of got up to speed with the Big 12 now. But it's just a tricky spot for BYU because it would have been nice to have 7 home games. And maybe you can still make that happen because 2026 and 2027 creates an opportunity to, set up a home and home because you've already got 6 home games for both of those seasons. Still, it's just kind of short notice when you're starting to market your schedule going forward. Like the SEC just rolled out its entire 2026 schedule. The ACC plans to roll out its formal dates at the end of January. The Big 12 rolls out its schedule, usually at that same time as well, end of January, early February, give or take. So you're getting to the point where you want to have this all lined up. And, BYU, when I reached out for comment with them, had no comment at this time, but I'm sure they'll have something here in the near future. I think there's some options at the group of 6 that would be really interesting to me. I mean, honestly, I kind of look at Boise State. The Pac-12 teams need 5 non-conference games because they've only got 7 conference games. They've got 8 members in their conference. Boise State, maybe you say, hey, Boise, let's do this thing again. Maybe a home and home, potentially. We'll see. But BYU and Cal is not going to happen now in 2026. And it's unfortunate, too, because I think that would have been a great game in terms of the quarterbacks. You would have had Bear Bachmeier, a sophomore, and then Jaren Kiave Sangupolotele, who was named Freshman All-American by On3. Bear Bachmeier was named Freshman All-American by 24/7 Sports. It would have been a great quarterback matchup. It would have been a fun series. Remember BYU and Cal? 2018, BYU lost. That was Kalani's 3rd season on the heels of upsetting Arizona. Then they lose to Cal. 2014 was one of the great moments in the independence era where BYU gets a win to cap off that regular season, and Bronco is crowd surfing in Berkeley. BYU beat Jared Goff on Pac-12 Network. Not much history between BYU and Cal. The first games took place back in 1999 when Tom Homo was coaching the Cal Golden Bears. And see, this series came together, BYU and Cal, for 26 and 27 as a byproduct of the Big 12 expanding to 16 teams. Because remember, BYU had a lot of non-conference dates with Utah and Arizona in future years. They then folded into the Big 12, created a lot of openings, and then BYU rolled out its future opponents' dates and layout of opponents last fall in September of 2024. In this game, this series was one of the ones that was announced as a byproduct of those changes. And if you go even further back, BYU, as my producer on Cougar Sports Saturday, Nate Slack, pointed out, BYU had a series with Miami for 2026 that was set to begin, and then there was going to be a return visit to Provo, but that got canceled in favor of playing Utah. Utah then folds into the Big 12, then Cal comes into the mix, and now they're looking for another situation. And honestly, had you kept the Miami series, it might have been the same fate because Miami has 9 conference games in the ACC, 3 non-con, and you know for sure they weren't going to cancel that game against Notre Dame. So you might have experienced the same fate had you kept Miami on the books for this 2026 season. The conference realignment pieces and all the different scheduling, it's crazy stuff. So I'm curious to see what BYU will put together for its 2026 schedule, but because it's important. You can't just dumb it down because we know that the committee will not just say, well, you Cal canceled on you and Utah folded into the league and all this nuance. It'll just simply be, well, you didn't play anyone if BYU's really good. And they'll say, oh, you only had 9 P4 games. These teams had 10. I can already see it now if BYU's in the same spot next December with the playoff. But that's the latest with scheduling, and you can go see the full story up on KSLSports.com. Taking a break, we'll get to BYU basketball around the corner right here on Cougar Tracks. Welcome back into Cougar Tracks here on the KSL Sports YouTube page. Every day, we're live talking BYU sports with you to give you the latest insight and analysis into BYU athletics. And if you haven't done so already, subscribe to the show. Leave a 5-star rating on all the audio podcast platforms. And if you're watching on YouTube or the KSLSports.com page, appreciate you for watching. Subscribe, like this video, helps out the show a ton. So some football tidbits that I wanted to get to here on the show. Some interesting names expected to enter the transfer portal when the portal for football officially opens in January. One of those guys being Texas linebacker Leona Lafau, who's someone from Kahuku High School. Raider DeMooney has been posting on X about him. Leona posted on Instagram a graphic saying he was forever grateful for his time at the University of Texas and said that he plans to enter the transfer portal for his final year of eligibility. And a lot of BYU players chiming into the comments on Instagram for Leona's announcement that he plans to enter the transfer portal. I think he would be a nice addition, and it makes a lot of sense. There's some connection there with Tausili Akana, with Raider DeMooney. When I spoke with Tausili Akana a couple weeks back, last month here on the show, you can go back to that interview, and I talked with Tausili about his connections at BYU, and he was really close with Raider DeMooney. The family connections at BYU mean a lot to him. And, of course, Tausili's got connections to Hawaii and then finished his high school career at Sky Ridge High School. So that's a guy that you look at and say makes so much sense to add to the culture at BYU. I do think it's interesting with BYU's reported enhanced resources as part of the long-term extension for Kalani Sitake. They can be a bigger player in some of these big names in the portal. They can get into the mix for those guys. But still, to their core, BYU, when they go portal hunting, they want to go to guys that they have familiarity with, a previous relationship with, because the good thing about BYU under Kalani Sitake, and this is being honest here, I haven't met really any player that has a broken relationship with BYU coaches and staff by not picking the Cougars. Or even when they leave and enter the portal and exit BYU, there's always kind of like a respect for Kalani. Like, yes, they wish it could have worked out better at BYU, but they appreciate Kalani. And that's always noteworthy because when it comes to recruiting, it can be easy for these coaches to just go, done with you. We invested all this into you, this time, and then you don't pick us, we're done with you. BYU always kind of plays a little bit of the long game. Now, Kalani's talked about how he doesn't want to play that long game. He wants to get these guys out of the gates in high school and get them right away. But there's always that good relationship there with BYU, from what it seems like. And I think it's shown itself. Isaiah Jadas, Andrew Gentry's. There's so many guys at BYU in recent transfer portal cycles that maybe turned down BYU initially, and then the second go-around or even the third go-around, BYU comes around and gets those guys that time. Gary Bohannon was another. BYU kind of kicked the tires on Bohannon back in 2022 or 2023, I believe. I'd have to go back and revisit those years. Yes, it was 2022, and then they got him in 2024. So it's about maintaining relationships, and Kalani Sitake's done a really good job of that. Another guy that's a name to watch in the portal, it was reported on Wednesday by Matt Zenitz of CBS Sports that Walker Lyons is expected to enter the transfer portal. And I was looking at Walker. He's got 2 years of eligibility remaining. And, of course, he's the USC tight end, former four-star recruit, who BYU was heavily in the mix for. He took an official visit to BYU in the summer. Remember, he had that picture with a stuffed cougar in the mountains. He was posing with the stuffed cougar. You're thinking, how are they not going to get this guy? He's posing with a live animal. Stuffed, but you get my point. Walker Lyons expected to enter the portal, that according to Matt Zenitz of CBS Sports. He's got 2 years of eligibility remaining. Imagine if he came to BYU, I think he'd be a favorite to start in 2026. And then 2027, who returns home from his mission? Younger brother, Ryder Lyons. Makes a lot of sense to me. And look, I need to see BYU with the TikTok fame. Riley Arnold, Walker Lyons, sign me up. Dancing with the Stars, let's go. But he'll be a name to monitor because of those ties and also because of the need. BYU loses Carson Ryan after this year. They have a pressing need at tight end. You've got some young guys in the pipeline, but none of them are guys that you point to and just hand the baton off to and say they have arrived and they are going to be the guys that carry the tight end position in 2026. You've got Kean Need, who's coming back, but he's primarily a blocker. You need a receiving tight end, and don't get caught up into stats because Carson Ryan, his stats were very minuscule before arriving at BYU. I think he's been pretty good this year. I still think there's more production that you'd like to see from the tight end spot, but I think BYU revived that position for the first time since being in the Big 12, where that position was a threat in the passing game because the first 2 years, it just simply wasn't. And I think Walker Lyons, if he did choose BYU, again, it's reported that he's going into the portal or expected to go into the portal. BYU would make a lot of sense for Walker Lyons. So that'll be one to keep tabs on. Going to the NFL, some news about former BYU quarterback Zach Wilson. Well, maybe lack of news is probably the better way to put it. Miami Dolphins are reportedly going to bench Tua Tagovailoa, former Alabama star, NFL veteran. He's getting benched. It's been a mess in Miami. And instead of turning to Zack Wilson, the Dolphins are expected to turn to Quinn Ewers as their starting quarterback. Such a bummer because I still think Zach's got a little bit of juice to him, man. I think he's still got the ability to make it happen. But sometimes you just don't get the opportunities. Wilson, of course, signed a one-year deal worth $6 million. He hasn't started a game in the NFL since 2023. He really hasn't played meaningful snaps in the NFL since 2023 when he's with the New York Jets. Isn't that crazy to think about, too? Only 2 years ago, he was with the Jets. Honestly, in my mind, it feels like that was 4 or 5 years ago. I know he's only been in the league since 2021, but the time between his stint with the Jets and to now, it feels like it's been a lifetime. Last year, he was with Denver, didn't play in a game. This year with Miami, he's had 3 game appearances, but very minuscule number of reps. I hope it works out for Zach Wilson and that he can get maybe another opportunity somewhere. Maybe he's a career backup. I don't know. But Zach Wilson, to me, is still one of the great talents in BYU football history at the quarterback position. And it's just a bummer that this felt like maybe that window, that opportunity late in the season for Miami to get an audition, say, this is your guy. Instead, they're going with the 7th rounder, former Texas Longhorn star Quinn Ewers as the starter. So kind of a bummer to not see Zach getting that reported start in Miami. Let's take our final break. On the other side, BYU basketball crushes Pacific. We'll hit on that next. Cougar Tracks rolls on here on KSL News Radio and the KSL Sports YouTube page. Mitch Harper here with you. BYU basketball crushed Pacific. The Cougars now have a 7-game win streak. They're 10-1 overall this season. They hammered Pacific 93-57. And oh, how the times have changed since BYU's days in the WCC. We talked about it yesterday here on the show. But clearly, this is no longer the BYU of the WCC days. What was showing up last night at the Marriott Center against a Pacific team that I thought was actually much better than UC Riverside, probably going to be better than Abilene Christian, better than Eastern Washington. Like, it was a pretty well-coached team. Even Kevin Young pointed to that. They've got an excellent head coach who's won titles in Canada and been a really good player. But still, BYU has leveled up in such a big way from their days in the WCC that you don't even recognize the BYU of old to now. And Pacific's AD, Adam Schuer, he went to X, and I'll admit, I missed his original post because, one, I'll chalk it up to X's new algorithm just hammering the chronological timeline. It doesn't even, it's not even chronological anymore. I don't know how people keep up with it anymore. I still hop on, but it's just crazy. So I missed this last night. I see it this morning. And Jake Hatch of the KSL Sports Zone, he captured the screenshot. Adam Schuer, the AD at Pacific, he wrote this. Tough one for Pacific men's basketball tonight. Good scheduling lesson for the future in this funny money age we're in. No point in playing this game at all. You're not even playing a basketball team, just walking bags of cash. How about that? Coming from an AD just referring to BYU as walking bags of cash. He then followed that up. He deleted that post, first off. He then followed it up and said on X, fair enough, BYU fans. I'll call mercy. My tongue-in-cheek tweet was not meant to offend. You all are a beast, and credit where credit is due. Simple economic realities of playing any top 10 team is something I think all of D1 has to contend with considering scheduling moving forward. Call it a mea culpa. I have a lot of respect for all your guys' passion, and it really was not meant to offend anyone, which it clearly did. Hate to think anyone would have taken it that way. When we refer to a team just solely as bags of cash, like, I think BYU gets a little more sensitive about this than other places. I've often said that BYU should absolutely lean into this narrative that BYU is just bags you and they've got endless streams of money. Like, whether it's true or not, because again, BYU's private, whether it's true or not, lean into it. Let everyone believe you are just bags you. You've got endless money. Sure, let them believe that. Let them believe that. And look, BYU has an expensive roster. Don't get it twisted. This is one of the most expensive rosters in college basketball, but still, there's a limit to everything. You can't get an entire roster of AJ DeBonsas on the team. But just to simply call them walking bags of cash, like, come on. I thought that was a little bit extra, honestly, especially when you consider you got to coach these guys, and they're an incredibly well-coached team. We've seen many teams in college basketball get high-profile stars at unconventional programs. And I say, like a Ben Simmons at LSU, Ace Bailey last year at Rutgers, Dylan Harper at Rutgers. Programs that you're not typically seeing the five stars roll through. Doesn't always work out. BYU, they got a really good coaching staff, and they're getting a lot out of these guys, and they're bringing this group together. And that was one of the big things, aside from the madness on social media from Pacific's AD, Adam Schuer. BYU just hammered this Pacific team. And look, it wasn't always easy. Pacific, to their credit, cut it down to 9 points. So they cut it down to 9 against the walking bags of cash, and then the walking bags of cash let their money speak. They go on a massive run and just pull away. BYU beats Pacific by 36 points. DeBonsa, 23 points for him. Richie Saunders, game high, 24. Rob Wright, 22. How incredible is it that BYU's got 3 guys that can single-handedly beat a team by a dozen? Those 3 scored 69 points. Pacific as a team, 57. Some interesting stats in this game. Pacific, 0 made free throws. 0 for 3 in the game. BYU, 24 of 27. BYU's full court press, too, like three quarters press, that was working quite well. I thought it was amazing that BYU forced Pacific into a 10-second violation. I'll admit, I can't remember many games where there's a 10-second violation, especially in the first half of a game. That never happens in college basketball. Maybe late in a game when a game's on the line, nerves start to happen, and players get nervous. Sure, that happens. But BYU's defense, I think that's one of the big stories here. The offense, they can fill it up, especially that big three. But defensively, BYU's knocking on the door of being a top 10 team in adjusted efficiency metrics defensively. And again, I continue to bring that up because that's the makeup of a national title contender. You have to be elite on both ends. They're elite offensively. We knew that going into the season. But defensively, it's showing up, even against Clemson. I think that second half against Clemson really turned the corner for this team defensively. And they've had other good stretches, Wisconsin. But I think that since the second half against Clemson, BYU's defense is playing outstanding. And now look, the competition, Pacific, UC Riverside in the next two games, light. But I'm pretty confident and optimistic that BYU can maintain this level of defensive play. Maybe not every night in the Big 12, but I think they're going to be a really tough out every single day in the Big 12. AJ DeBonza continues to just shine for BYU. 23 points, 8 of 14 from the field, 10 rebounds. First double-double for AJ. And I loved Kevin Young's comparison to Ben Simmons, where you have a playmaking guard and he can get you out in the run and find the open guy and get it to the playmakers. AJ is a team guy, man, and the chemistry that you're seeing between him and his teammates, it's continuing to evolve. I love that play where he passes between the legs to Richie Saunders. It's things like that. You don't make that sort of move when you don't have a chemistry with a player. You're going to go with the more traditional pass, not going to go between the legs. That chemistry is evolving with AJ and this big three and the rest of this team at large. Alexei Kostic coming off the bench. He didn't play in this one. He had a big game against UC Riverside. He was battling an illness. But Tyler Moross, we were talking about him yesterday. He stepped up 15 points, 4 of 4 from 3. I also liked what he provided, getting some loose balls, getting active in the passing lanes. I thought Tyler Moross had a nice game. Now, will it carry in Big 12 play? We'll see. But it was a moment where he said, okay, you can do this. You can knock down some threes as we've expected you to do. And he did that against Pacific. So I thought that was a breakthrough performance for Moross. BYU's second unit, I still have some questions about outside of Hadim Boop. Outside of him, what can you realistically expect every single night from these guys? But in this lighter stretch of the schedule, I think it's good that these guys are giving you some moments to say, hey, if called upon, I can help you out. But it needs to be stacked days, as Kevin Young likes to say, in order for you to feel a little bit more confident about this second unit. But I think they're coming together well. Keba Keita, only 19 minutes in the game, two points for Keba Keita. Kennard Moo Davis, 2 points, 1 of 10, 0 of 7 from 3. BYU as a team knocked down 11 of its 28 three-point attempts. I still think they can improve in shooting the three ball, but by most accounts, though, pretty good night for BYU offensively. Whenever you're putting up more than 50 and a half, yeah, it's a pretty good night scoring the rock for BYU basketball. They're now 10-1. They will return to action on Friday against Abilene Christian, 7:30 tip-off, 6:30 p.m. pregame show right here on KSL. And that's going to do it for this edition of Cougar Tracks. I hope all of you enjoyed it. Make sure to subscribe to the show, and I'll talk to you tomorrow here on Cougar Tracks. It's powered by KSL Sports.